This time, we're going to be talking about a streamer who joined Overwatch League, was unexpectedly good, eating people alive match after match, then retired like an absolute demon. Prepare yourself below the belt for an Overwatch story of a lifetime. Back in the olden days of 2020, Overwatch League was starting to fizzle out the junk. Of course, you can't get rid of all of it, but the teams were starting to realize they shouldn't be paying some of these people. If you watch the earlier seasons, you know there were a lot of players who just didn't belong. Eventually, coaches just started to get smarter of who to get on their team, looking for certain values during tryouts, an actual reason for a player to be on a roster. Who we're talking about today was the only time after the poo-poo age of Overwatch where a streamer got picked up due to his mechanical skill. Our favorite coach, Dusty Krusty, saw Onz's prowess through his stream gameplay and thought he would be a good pickup for San Francisco Shock in 2020. Onz did have contenders experience, but it was so minimal and his results were rancid. Blossom was a really bad team, and it's funny how Onz and Lip both came from this team, by the way. I don't think they ever played together, but it's hilarious to think of an Onz-Lip DPS line being trash. Of course, bad results don't inherently mean the player will suck. It's a team game, and sometimes it's just impossible for someone talented to truly blossom, if you will. Shock was coming off of winning the 2019 Grand Finals, and no one entirely expected roster changes at all because they just dominated the finals match. The team was filled with greats. We had Super, Smurf, Choyobin, Striker, Violet, Moth, an absolute powerhouse of a team. Onz was the only new addition going into 2020, and to put this into perspective, even people heavily in the scene had no idea who this kid was. His reputation was just streamer guy from Korea who just played Widow every day and sometimes Ashe. Granted, his performances were really good on stream, but the difference between top 500 and the highest level of play is astronomical. Most, if not all, streamers would get pounded into oblivion if you just threw them into the fire like this, especially the expectations of joining the defending champion team. It's a lot of pressure for the streamer, man. This situation is similar to giving someone boxing gloves and expecting them to take on hundreds of lions. Statistically, you have no chance, but there's a small baby of a chance for you to defeat those said lions and return to your village with a necklace of their teeth. As the gates opened for 2020, Onz expectedly didn't play that much. A strange DPS rotation was happening. Rascal came in sometimes. We had the forbidden Overwatch League character retire. Striker was sometimes coming in to play hitscan. Even Architect would play hitscan, even though he wasn't really known for it, and I guarantee most people didn't even remember he was here. We all got to witness the classic Krusty crack pipe move where everything was a mess, but somehow the team was still having a decent start to the season. It was just confusing to watch Striker come in to play Ashe, then Architect comes in to play Ashe, then Onz comes in to play Ashe or Cassidy. Unless it's a very specific strategy where they're going to swap to something else on a certain map or point, just pick one and stay with it. The hitscan tier list from worst to best on Shock was Architect, Striker, and then Onz was the best. He actually had great performances on Cassidy and Ashe, so it was a question on why he even got subbed out in the first place. After about maybe 9 or 10 matches, thankfully Shock found their line. Striker Onz was the solidified DPS most of the time. Striker would typically play Tracer, and Onz finally started coming into form, looking to be the best hitscan on Earth. Every match, every map, no matter who we went against, Onz was just better. Honestly, being a living highlight reel, whether it was Widow, Ashe, or Cassidy, he was outputting damage numbers second to no one, and these poor bastards did not understand what Onz had in his pocket. My guess was experimental Adderall. It just wouldn't end. Obviously, players have a good string of matches sometimes, or maybe a match of a lifetime where they just perform out of their mind, but when it came to 2020 Onz, those dips just didn't happen. He was consistently the best, arguably having the highest peak of all time. On hitscan, it might not even be an argument. Almost every fight, Onz would get first pick, causing Shock to have a 6v5. He would solo carry fights, winning games for his team, even having the league's final blow record of 90 in a single match by playing Widow. What made this so amazing was, again, how Onz was just the streamer Widow kid. He wasn't proper dominating on O2 Blast. Onz had no story and actually zero previous success. Yet he was putting storied players who either grinded in contenders or just had a name for themselves throughout Overwatch right into the trash can. If a casual watched Onz, they would probably assume he somehow was able to cheat in Overwatch League, and I honestly wouldn't blame them for thinking that either. His performances were insane, and I still think this is the most explosive rookie performance of all time, even more so than proper. When you're like Ons and have zero hype behind you and pull performances like this off, like what else can you say? He went from no one knows the name of Ons to Ons is the best hitscan player on earth in the span of about 2 to 3 months. You could always see the fear in the opposing hitscan player after Ons started showing his ultimate power. No one would aggressively peek him, no one would ego him, the guy was practically untouchable. That's obviously a huge advantage over the other team when you're scaring them to death before the match even starts. It got to the point of some teams not even mirroring the Widow because they just admitted defeat before the map started and tried other ways to mitigate his value. Shock ended up winning 2 stages in 2020 because the Smurf Choyobin double shield was a disease to go against, while you also had Ons on Ashe, which was just disgusting. The only time Shock didn't make a finals was when Genji was overtuned during Summer Showdown. They just didn't have a good enough player for it. If Super can't do it, then no one can, right? I feel like a lot of the success that Shock had throughout the year was actually because of Ons' performance. Not saying these other players are bad because they obviously aren't, but Ons was straight winning matches for the Shock at times. This guy was a cheat code no one else had. Looking like the best player on your team while you're playing alongside Violet, Smurf, Choyobin, Striker, Super, Moth, and Twilight is not easy. These people are considered to a lot of viewers as the best in their roles during this era, and here we have Mr. Widowman, who months prior was just streaming ranked all the time, takes the spotlight away from all of them. Seeing a random person who had no success prior and just streamed the game a lot reach heights such as this was probably inspiring to people everywhere. Granted, I do think Ons is an anomaly. I'm not going to pretend this is something anyone can do. This pickup was a gamble. Ons could have flopped completely and we wouldn't even be talking about him right now. A 1 in a million shot that paid off, and this kid just destroyed Overwatch League as a nobody. He was by far the best hitscan player in the entire game. What he did to everyone throughout 2020 was beyond impressive. Viewers were really excited to see Ons once again in 2021, but unfortunately, Ons did something really bad. The Overwatch community equivalent of drowning a dog in a pool. Ons retired to play Valorant. He was also having mental health struggles, so he wanted to work on himself before he got back into competitive play. It does make sense considering that's more of an aim-heavy game. You can't always play hitscan in Overwatch and sometimes be forced onto less comfortable heroes. This was a massive issue to the Shock, losing who was considered the best Overwatch hitscan player on Earth. This would only add on to the Shock's chaos of that year. As we all know, there were plentiful amounts of problems internally in 2021. We had Striker ready to beat Nero's teeth in with a keyboard and suplex his mother into Satan's asshole. Violet on Lucio before it was good. Having a hitscan player in Glister who for whatever reason barely ever played hitscan. It was a mess. Their performances weren't bottom of the league or anything, but teams were better than the Shock by a noticeable margin for the first time since 2018. As the 2021 season went on, the team realized obviously changes needed to be made. Striker retired, the BattleBot had enough of the team's antics, these worthless rookies cannot suppress Striker's power any longer, and Ons came out of retirement and returned to Overwatch after a few months. His performances in Valorant were not great, to say the least. I'm not going to pretend I know anything about it or how the game even functions fundamentally, but maybe his expectations were higher considering what he did on the Shock in 2020. It doesn't matter though, because as a competitive Overwatch fan, only one game can exist and people cannot play other things. It's fine, we don't even need to worry. This was just exciting for the Overwatch world. Ons was back, ready to pound once more. Our streamer has returned. Except this just didn't happen. Ons just wasn't Ons. He wasn't horrible by any means, but in comparison to what he showcased in 2020, the difference was quite egregious. The constant highlight reel, winning fights for your team on a consistent basis was just gone. My assumption is this has to do a lot with mental expectations, like thinking to yourself, I was pounding the ass of everyone last time and now I'm getting exposed, people are chasing me down, I'm losing 1v1s against other Widow or Ashe players, my aim isn't good, or whatever other thoughts rush into your mind in the moment, causing a mental decline, spiraling into constantly feeling bad about yourself. The community antagonizing the person can also aid into this, but of course you kind of put yourself into that position as a public figure. But when someone dominates as hard as Ons did in 2020, the perception of the community expects you to do that all the time, and it's sort of fair for them to get mad when you don't. A similar thing happens with Proper all the time. When he's not killing everyone every fight, not grabbing the enemy backline and crushing their skulls against the pavement, people shout from the rooftops how shit he is, when in reality Proper is still one of the best players on earth. Individually, he is still a freak. I use Proper purely as a comparison example, but the Ons situation, he actually did show a noticeable fall off. He was only on Shock for 2 stages in 2021, the Summer Showdown and Countdown Cup, where he actually did play a lot, unless he randomly got subbed out for Glister to play the same hero. I still don't understand it. Krusty did the same exact thing in 2023 with Junbin and Max, but I never realized it until making this video how this was a problem for years apparently. Here he was just subbing out a player who plays Cassidy the whole map to put someone else in who just plays Cassidy the whole map. I just don't get it. I think the pressure did end up getting to Ons, unfortunately, where he just didn't play again for 2021 playoffs. And after Ons' final year on Shock, his motivation was not done, thankfully. The streamer man still had it in him to compete, this time switching teams, joining LA Gladiators for 2022, and people were hoping now was the time for Ons to get a mental reset. Overwatch 2 was said to be a more individualistic, DPS-centric game, a perfect place for Ons to come in and wreak havoc. As the season began, Soldier was actually overpowered during the first stage of 2022. Like seriously, Nanovisor was overpowered. It was practically uncounterable. The second this ultimate combo went off, your entire team was dead 90% of the time. Nothing like watching pure raw dog skill such as this at the highest level. I love watching Nanovisor wiping teams out on repeat. Ons came in a few times to play it, and then Patapan came in to play a majority of it. Whenever Widow and Ashe was needed to be played though, Ons always came to field it, where he still looked quite good. Not 2020 level, but still a good player. After this, our beloved Sojourn came into prevalence, being disgustingly overpowered. I'm sure everyone has PTSD of launch Sojourn. This is what we expected Ons to come in for. One headshot killed 4 out of 5 players in the opposing team. Building rails was brain dead easy. A true one-shot machine, perfect for Ons. But he just never really played it. I didn't understand why. Possibly we had more confidence issues, which seemed to be a running theme with Ons, sadly. The only time we saw him play was on Circuit for Widow, which he still looked really good at, as I said, until Stage 3. Junker Queen came into people's hands. Everyone could play this amazing broken hero that was meta everywhere, every map, every point. There was no escape from it. Ons actually came in to play Sojourn full time, occasionally fielding the Ashe. We finally got to see him on every map. It was a true blessing until it wasn't, because partway through the stage, Gladiators picked up Happy, making Ons never play again. I don't really think Ons performed badly on Sojourn or Ashe, but it was Happy we're talking about, so he's also a freak at hitscan, and I guess you might want him over Ons. It just depends on how you look at it. This sort of ended the Mr. Streamer Widow guy's competitive career, having one of the strangest careers out of anyone I've ever seen. No one knew who he was. He had no success, no nothing. Who came in and dominated Overwatch League. I cannot express the pure domination enough in 2020, making a true name for himself as one of the best players in the world for a time, being a champion, role star, and Rookie of the Year candidate, then having a fall off similar to a person who eats peanut butter Oreos for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. Even though his fall off was insane, we can't pretend what he did in 2020 was a normal thing. Ons truly does deserve respect for being put into the position he was in and exceeding it by miles. His Ashe and Widow play will always be remembered by the viewers who got to watch it live. The true shock put into everyone's souls by his performances were so unexpected and amazing. Ons did have a lot of health issues, and I'm sure the unreasonable expectations he set for himself didn't really help him get any better with it, but I hope now in 2024 he's doing much better. Most recently, Ons played Ashe in that Flash Ops Korea thing that happened a few months back where he didn't look terrible. That team placed 3rd, losing to OW2 High School, so clearly he's still got the talent in him to keep going. Hopefully he'll try to get onto a Champion Series roster eventually and perform well there. I'm curious to hear how you feel about Ons. Do you feel like he had the highest peak of all time, or even the most explosive rookie performance of all time? Please let me know in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching to the end. Make sure to subscribe for more Overwatch content similar to this, and also check out my last video going over the best player at every hero from Overwatch 1. It's a long one, but a doozy.